The horror at Ground Zero in New York City is hard to imagine, but some of our local emergency workers don't have to imagine. They were there as part of a DMAT, or Disaster Medical Assistance Team. They weren't sifting through the rubble, but they had a very important job. Members of the Gulf Coast Disaster Medical Assistance Team board a bus which takes them from what they describe as normal life in Midtown Manhattan to what looks like a war zone.
Kerosene heaters are at every station now.
People stop and wave and hang posters to show their support, and this crew needs support for what they're about to see. The minute they arrive at their command center, they disperse into groups. Some will stay here, blocks from Ground Zero. This is the nerve center of the medical team. All lines of communication and supplies come through here. Other people will be treating patients feet from the rubble. We are in a medical treatment unit inside a tent around the perimeter of Ground Zero. We're actually blocks away from where the towers collapsed. But even this far away, everyone here has to wear a respirator and a hard hat just in case any debris or smoke blows this way. But this medical treatment unit sits on the front lines, and most patients working in the heart of Ground Zero seek medical treatment here.
But the majority of the people we're treating, we're probably washing eyes, a lot of blisters now, walking around all day on that cement, a lot of cuts, scrapes, lacerations. We've had some broken ribs.
This unit is in a burnt-out restaurant with menus still on the wall. The drink stand is now a cooler for medical supplies, and tables are now used to check in patients.
I just got two back-to-back for a headache, and they're both wanting Excedrin. A lot of people coming in for headaches tonight.
These Gulf Coast emergency workers have treated over 3,000 rescue workers who are sifting through hot steel and burning debris looking for bodies. Rebecca Dotson is on her first deployment with the DMAT team. She, like everyone else, is having a tough time dealing with the enormity of this tragedy.
The other work that you do, you go to, say, a car crash, and you have a number of patients, whether it's 2 or 8, but it's limited. And you're dealing with such an extreme here that it does not compare.
And you look at the pile and it looks like, okay, that's a big pile of rubble. And then you step back and you go, wait, there's 6,000 people in that pile of rubble.
And as you can imagine, this trip has taken an emotional toll on everyone, especially knowing that they were working next to debris where 6,000 people were buried, including their fellow firefighters and paramedics. And you'll hear more of their stories in the days to come. Photojournalist Randy Lowe and I recently returned from New York City. We were there covering our local firefighters and paramedics who were treating rescue workers at Ground Zero. And they say the work was very tiring and depressing. But when we got there, we brought something special that really lifted their spirits. When they arrived in New York City, Gulf Coast emergency workers say the sounds, sights, and smell of Ground Zero were disturbing and unforgettable.
I'm proud of him here, but I'm even more proud of him up there because, you know, he's my hero.
Paula Rutland is a Mobile firefighter. Her husband, Tony, is one of about 40 Gulf Coast emergency workers helping in New York. And she, like many wives, wanted to lift her husband's spirits. So they sent us with personal care packages.
I know who this is from because it says 458. That's a code. It's a code.
Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, it means I love you.
Oh. These men haven't been able to receive letters and packages since they left because for security reasons, they couldn't disclose where they were staying. It's from your family? Randy Smith says he hasn't smiled like this in a while. His care package is from his wife and small children. They sent cards and a string of pictures for him to hang up in his hotel room.
You know, I got a very tolerant family. You know, I love them a lot, and you know, they're the ones that really give me the I guess the spirit and the mood to keep going on.
Jeff Turner's wife Belinda and their 2 children sent I miss you cards and goodies. His kids stayed up late packing the care packages.
They've been on my mind the whole time. I mean, in the back of your mind, you're thinking about, you know, what their thoughts are while we're away up here if something else could happen.
In addition to the letters,
We got snack food.
their wives sent along some of their favorite treats.
Outstanding homemade chocolate. I usually get this once a year, Christmas.
Each package had a special touch of home. Dr. John McCann got the weekend sports pages, and Tony Rutland got fur from both his cats and a piece of a plant from his house.
Paula is sweet. She thinks about other people a lot.
Their wives say their care packages were just one more way to let their husbands know their families are proud of them.
He's always wanting to help people. He loves to do this kind of thing. He's done it for nearly 30 years now. Proud of him, oh yeah.
And as you can see, it really made their day to open those care packages. They had been so down, and their mood changed instantly when they opened those packages.
It looked like it was quite a surprise to them all.
Oh, they were totally shocked.
Well, I imagine it gives you a lot of satisfaction being a part of all that, being the bearer of good tidings.
Oh, it really did. I couldn't wait to give them those packages. We had driven 20 hours, and it was just great to be a part of that.
Looking forward to seeing part 2.
Oh, thanks, Mel. Thanks, Gina. We've all seen the television images of Ground Zero, and we've heard from people who say seeing it up close is very different. And that was certainly the case for Gulf Coast emergency workers who traveled to Manhattan to help in the recovery effort. But we want to caution you, some of the things you're about to hear may be disturbing.
When I look at that pile of wreckage, I'm realizing I'm looking at the burial pyre of over 6,000 people, including a lot of my brother paramedics.
Jeff McCann is one of 40 Gulf Coast paramedics who can't stop thinking about death. Not only the thousands of victims who worked inside the World Trade Center towers, but also the paramedics who died trying to save them.
I noticed hanging from this pole right here was an empty IV bag with an IV connector to it. And the thought hit me that right on this spot, it's clean now, but then, it was a mess. And the thought hit me that one of my brother paramedics on this very spot was fighting to save somebody's life out of that disaster.
Many Gulf Coast paramedics and firefighters went to New York to help treat the thousands of rescue workers. Many of those workers are injured while working in the 16-acre pile of twisted steel and debris. Firefighter Tony Rutland says working near the pile is unsettling.
My opinion is we're probably breathing slivers of glass, concrete, sheetrock, and probably people.
You said you're breathing people?
Well, a lot of them people, they're imploded. They just demolished. So there's not a lot of bodies are not going to be found. So the glass and the sheetrock, and the only thing in that pile down there is steel. There's no wood, there's no sheetrock, there's no glass. So all of it's just floating around.
And that's hard to comprehend or accept.
I'm trying to put it into words, and it's very difficult. It really is.
It's just unbelievable. Things that if you don't see it, you can't understand it, and we probably can't really describe it adequately to you.
I have interviewed so many of these emergency workers, and I could not understand why they couldn't describe what they saw at Ground Zero. But my photographer and I, Randy Lowe, just came from Ground Zero, and what we saw is beyond description. It is overwhelming.
But as far as being difficult, it is difficult because you gotta do your job, and it's like being at a funeral home the whole time you're there because they're steady pulling bodies out and body parts, and each body part that comes out or clothing or anything they find that's dealing with a person, it's being blessed by a priest.
Mel and our local crews told me it wasn't until they came home that the impact of what they saw fully sunk in.
Well, Devon, of course, you were there. How did seeing all that affect you?
It was the saddest sight I've ever seen, and every day that I've been home, I've thought about it, those poor, poor people who are trapped in that pile. So it's been very depressing for me.
Of course, we'll have part 3 tomorrow night.
While many Americans are focused on the threat of anthrax, work continues at Ground Zero, and nothing can prepare you for what you see when you see it personally. That's true not only for photojournalist Randy Lowe and I, but even more so for our 40 Gulf Coast emergency workers who traveled there as part of a medical assistance team. On September 10th, no one would have thought this deli would soon be called Medical Station 4, or that the American Express building lobby would be transformed into a triage unit, or that the World Trade Center would look like this.
It is sort of like looking at a Spielberg movie with some ungodly special effects.
It may look like a movie, but Peter Brown knows all too well it's real. He'll also tell you he wasn't prepared for this when he arrived in New York.
The size and the scope of the devastation cannot be properly displayed on television. You just can't can't consume all the information that's presented with pictures or video.
And I have to agree, I saw plenty of TV footage before I came to New York, but nothing compared to seeing it in person. I had to suit up in coveralls to keep ashes from my clothes, and I remember at this point I was in shock.
It's just hard to believe that there's 6,000 people in there. You don't see any people.
I didn't see the crews recover bodies of anyone, but I heard plenty of sad stories, especially when someone found the body of a firefighter who was lost. Our local crews say it's a chilling image you can't totally understand unless you see it in person.
We found the body last night, or the rescue workers did, the body of a fireman, and they put a flag over him, and when he was taken out to be taken to the morgue, I suppose there were 200 or 300 police officers and firemen that were all lined up, saluting. It was a sight because every one of them were weeping.
And every one of these rescue workers is exhausted from the countless days of searching for bodies. Jeff McCann is a Pensacola paramedic. He's performed first aid on some of these workers, and he's heard their stories. The worst part is knowing they aren't going to find anyone alive.
I can see it in their faces. I can see the grief and the pain and the exhaustion as these people work and work and work, even though we've reached a time now where there's really no hope left.
And all our local workers can do is be there to treat their wounds and offer support.
I can promise you there was not a single firefighter, not a single paramedic, not a single EMT that the minute they saw it didn't say, I want to be there helping. There wasn't a single police officer who didn't want to be here helping.
And what a lot of people don't know is that every single member of that disaster medical assistance team is a volunteer. They don't get paid for their work. They don't get paid for their countless hours of training.
But I'm sure they feel the training was well worth it.
Oh, they said there's no better feeling knowing that they could be there helping.
We'll hear from you again on Monday night.
You could also hear words of prayer at Ground Zero. 3 of our local chaplains traveled there to offer spiritual comfort to those in need.
Since September 11th, many people have turned to faith for comfort. At Ground Zero, that faith has a face. Chaplains from Mobile who traveled to Manhattan to comfort the hurting.
We do what we call the ministry of presence. You just be there, and they come up to you, and they begin to talk, and they love to talk. They're devastated, and they're seeking help. They've been stunned.
They, meaning emergency crews from across the country who are digging through 16 acres of death and destruction. These Mobile chaplains volunteered to go to Ground Zero to offer comfort to those who need it most.
When you have people that in this general vicinity who are firemen and who are policemen and FBI agents and EMT who work here, who literally saw these people jumping from buildings, saw them, and I could go further than that, but I won't. The shock that they have.
The particular precinct that I'm working with, they lost around 18 members of their department, and they are devastated, and they really appreciate us being here working with them.
Ronnie Wurzler is the chaplain for the city of Mobile. He describes Ground Zero as unlike anything he has ever seen. But comforting people who are searching for bodies isn't easy. Wurzler says he found the written word can be more powerful than saying anything at all.
I gave a fireman a Bible, and he loved it so much he took off his jacket and gave me one of his T-shirts.
Ron Pierce says he too has prayed with many people in New York. He says some people ask for spiritual strength. Others simply want a shoulder to cry on.
We are actually ministering to these people hour by hour and sometimes even minute by minute. They are bringing the families in now so that they can say goodbye. And that's a very overwhelming sight.
And in situations like that where a lot of people are crying and they're upset, I asked the 3 chaplains how they stayed strong, and they admitted it was tough.
I imagine they did a lot of praying for that strength as well.
Oh, they sure did. They said that prayer is what helped them make it through.
And we look forward to part 5 tomorrow night at 10 o'clock.
More than 300 firefighters were killed in the September 11th attacks. And while in New York City, photojournalist Randy Lowe and I noticed how many fire stations became shrines to remember the dead. Gulf Coast firefighters say the shrines are a way to honor their fallen brothers. These are the faces of New York's bravest. They are firefighters, fathers, friends, and brothers.
It's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching to know that 300-something brothers were murdered on September the 11th.
The Battalion 9 fire station in the heart of New York City is now a shrine dedicated to the 15 men who died after rushing into the World Trade Center towers. Lieutenant Bob Jackson with the New York Fire Department didn't find out the bad news until he returned to the station early Wednesday morning on the 12th after an exhausting day of fighting the fires.
That's when I found out all was lost from this firehouse. We had a hope that 54 engine was in a hospital. We thought we had some information like that. And once I found that out, I just broke down.
And there have been so many tears shed by people who visit this special place. Randy Smith with Mobile Fire Rescue says he feels a brotherhood with these men, even though he never knew them personally. Many miles may separate Mobile from Manhattan, but there is a special closeness.
It hurts, it really does. I had one captain last night I got to talking to for about 30 minutes, and he had said something just like another firefighter on TV said, said somebody asked me the other day about where my brother's at out here. He said, we're wearing them, we're breathing them, we're eating them, they're all over us. And, he's right.
In addition to the notes of sympathy written to the firefighters' families and cards, flowers, and posters, this giant statue is also dedicated to the firefighters. This memorial was supposed to be sent to Missouri in honor of firefighters who had lost their lives in the line of duty there. But when the Missouri Fire Department learned of the tragedy on September 11th and all the New York firefighters who lost their lives, they donated it to the New York Fire Department in honor of their fallen brothers. Gulf Coast firefighters say seeing this in person gives them a sense of comfort and peace. Cecil Johnston was speechless when he first saw it.
It took my breath away. It was unbelievable. The night that we came down the first time, the people that were out front, you could just feel the love of everybody's heart going out for the families, the firefighters, and the great loss that this company's received.
And again, 15 firefighters from that station died, and now 28 children lost their fathers.
I'm sure those fallen firefighters were on their minds at all times.
Oh, they said they were. They said that anytime they got tired during their long days, they just kept going, knowing that those firefighters would have done the same for them.
Thank you, Devon.